Okay, so before I dive into this whole reading Twilight thing, I want you to know that I'm trying to go in with an open mind. I'm not an absolute snob when it comes to books. I love me some Dan Brown. I know he's very repetitive and throws in superfluous little details and uses cheap tricks like a ticking clock. But I can't put his books down. So yes, I am not an absolute snob, and I also am not the kind of person who will just read a classic and be like, oh, it's fabulous. I'm reading Crime and Punishment right now, and I hate it. Raskolnikov, who's the lead character, can't freaking stand him. He killed someone, and now he just will not stop complaining about it and fainting all the time, and I'm like, get over it, Raskolnikov. So I'm interested to see what happens when I start reading the Twilight thing. I'm not going into this completely blind. I read a little bit of the second book when I was in high school. I mainly read that chunk of the second book because people kept going, oh, you should read Twilight, oh, you'd love it. And then one girl finally went, you actually remind me a little bit of the lead character. This comparison mainly being drawn from the fact that I really enjoy reading Shakespeare and books. And I had brown hair at the time, so maybe that did it? I don't know. I certainly like to think it's not because of my personality, since I have one. It also may have partly stemmed from the fact that I was one of those vampire kids in high school. Not like goth or anything, but I really liked vampire fiction. Ta-da! Anne Rice! I own all of the Vampire Chronicles, and yes, I read them all in high school. And middle school, actually. Loved all the vampires, the over-sexualized vampires, with their big words and their history. So someone told me I should read Twilight, and finally, after being told it like a dozen times, I was like, fine, I'll read it! And I was very protective of my vampire literature at the time. Did not want it to be tainted by something new. So I went and I read it. The first chapter of the second book, which isn't really a good way to start reading a series, I know. But I figured it would get me past all the exposition and just throw me right into the characters. What made me decide not to read it ever again was the fact that in this first chapter of the second book, Bella says that her favorite fictional character is Romeo. I'm sorry, out of all of Shakespeare, out of Romeo and Juliet, Romeo? Not very good. I could name you two far superior characters in that play. Number one, Mercutio, hilarious, very attractive, and very verbose. Two, Juliet, who's only supposed to be like 13, but still has this fabulous soliloquy about life and death and love, and she's great. Then you have Romeo. It's just a teenage boy going from one girl to the next. Thus we find the initial problem with Bella Swan. She has no taste. Okay, I guess I've said what I had to say before I dive in. I don't actually own a copy of Twilight because I want the people at Barnes & Noble to respect me. So I'm actually reading the first chapter online, because really the internet can think of me what it pleases. For those of you who would object to reading the book free online, think of it as me renting it from the library. Except the library still respects me. See you on the other side. Alright, so I just finished reading the preface, as well as chapter 1 of Twilight. I have to admit, the preface was good. It was brief, which is always nice, but it sets up the book. It kind of gets you wanting to read it. You're like, oh, someone's gonna die. Bitchin'. And judging by the first line in chapter 1, I'm guessing that's why she did the preface. Preface? Preface. My mother drove me to the airport with the windows rolled down. Okay, throws us into the action, but it's not very exciting. What is far more exciting is I'd never given much thought to how I would die, though I'd had reason enough in the last few months. But even if I had, I would not have imagined it like this. Which is a little overly dramatic, but you're like, oh man, that's kind of exciting. So yeah, we get it. Bella loves Phoenix and hates forks. Like a fork in the road. Get it? Though it's interesting, she talks about how much she loves the sun, yet she's just wicked pale. So clearly she's never out in the sun. I also kind of love that she uses herself to describe her mom within like the first page. My mom looks like me except with short hair and laugh lines. Great, Bella. I don't know what you look like. I think Stephanie Meyer just forgot that people didn't realize she was writing the book about her. And I understand that it's sort of hard to describe a character immediately when you're in the first person, because it's like, hi, my name's Bella Swan, I'm this tall and I do these things. But she has a whole big long paragraph like that later on, where she goes on to describe, you know, her hair, how pale she is, how she doesn't have blue eyes, therefore brown eyes. And she also described herself as soft somehow. She's lean, but she's soft somehow. I guess that means she just doesn't have muscle. I kind of want to know what Bella has against her dad so much. Like, why she calls him Charlie. Why she insists on calling him Charlie rather than Dad. He seems like the nicest person in the world. I know they don't live together, but still, it's your dad. Call him Dad. I also kind of want to know why she left. When Bella's talking about, no, it's okay, I'll leave, it's great, yay! And her mom's like, you can come home whenever you want, I'll come right back as soon as you need me. But I could see the sacrifice in her eyes behind the promise. Where's her mom going? Like, why does she hate her daughter so much? Why can't her daughter come with her? Is that like the mystery? Is that what we're gonna find out at the end of the Twilight Saga? Why Bella left Phoenix for Forks? Is it so that her mom can have a better sex life? Is that what's going on? Because I feel like as a child that should not be your obligation. Oh, there was one sentence that really threw me off. And I want to know if this is in the actual book, because the page is omitted from the Amazon. So I had to look it up online. But I looked it up on 3 different websites where you can read the first chapter for free. And she's talking about her bedroom. The room was familiar. It had been belonged to me since I was born. Been belonged. Been belonged. That can't be right, can it? I have to be... There has to be some sort of grand mistake there. See, this is one of those little things that just throws me off entirely. I reread that sentence 4 times, certain that I had to be misreading it. Maybe it's a typo. Sometimes typos slip by. I'll give Miss Meyer the benefit of the doubt. I have to say, I find it interesting that she's like dreading high school so much when clearly she didn't have any friends back in Phoenix. What's the worst that could happen? You're a loser again? And then she goes to high school and surprise, everyone's really nice to her. And still all she does is complain. All these people are introducing themselves to her and she's like, I forgot their names as quickly as they told them to me. Though she seems to forget that because then she immediately knows that this girl's name is Jessica. Like, the guy she meets right at first, what was his name? Like Eric or something? He helps her get to her class right away and she just complains that he's overly helpful and that he wants to be her friend. How awful is life for Bella Swan? She's pretty and people want to be her friend. Then of course we get to lunch and she finally meets the Cullens. Well, she doesn't meet them, she just stares at them awkwardly. Honestly, this Jessica chick that she's talking to about the Cullens, I wouldn't be surprised if this girl had this angry face, not because of Edward Cullen, but because Bella will not drop the subject of the Cullens. Jessica's trying to be nice and tell her about the town, ask her how life is, and all Bella can do is not look at any of the people sitting at the lunch table, just stares at the Cullens. Because Bella Swan is shallow. She goes to biology and she sits next to Edward. I also love that every time she goes to a class, she's like, I already know all this stuff. Why don't you take harder classes then? Schools are usually pretty good about that. So yeah, she meets Edward Cullen, who just seems like kind of a douche who thinks she smells bad, or maybe he's just weird, because everyone seems to think he's weird. I don't know why Bella assumes he just like loathes her, because honestly, I've been on the subway, and I'm sure you have too, and sometimes there'll be someone just sitting across from you, just glaring at you. Not any particular reason, they're just crazy. But she takes it very personally, and like smells her hair to make sure she doesn't smell bad. Cause yeah, if you're gonna smell bad, it's definitely gonna be your hair. That's what you're gonna smell. And then she meets a nice guy named Mike who's interested, and she finally is nice to someone, and she's finally interested in them because he's cute. That probably helps. I kinda like this Mike guy. Asking if she stabbed Edward Cullen with a pencil or something. That's a good line. She has to go to PE, but she can't stand PE. Oh, and what do you know? We have the first misuse of the word literally. Because she says Forks was literally my personal hell on earth. Nah. I get it, you're klutzy. It's only said about 8 times in the first chapter. You fell off a plane, that's what you did. Ran into a desk, good for you. Perpetual klutz. I wonder what hilarious antics are going to ensue. I love that Edward Cullen is clearly totally not into Bella, but all she can talk about is how attractive he is. He was arguing with her in a low, attractive voice. Do you care about nothing else, Bella Swan? And at the end of the day, rather than rejoicing in the fact that everyone seemed to like her, one person was mean to her, who everyone else in the school seems to think is insane, even though he happens to be very pretty, and she wants to cry. She met a cute guy that really likes her, but this other cute guy doesn't like her. Life is awful. That was my experience with chapter 1. I don't have as much problem with the writing as I thought I would. I just hate Bella Swan. I want her to get over herself. My mom might have a copy of this book, she told me, because she teaches high school reading. So I think when I go to Florida in a couple weeks, I'll just pick up where I left off. See you next time. I'm gonna have a lot to edit out of this because I filmed like half an hour of footage.